Thank you for that introduction. I always find it weird hearing my own introduction. I think nutrition is just fantastic. I love it. I love food. I've got 3 degrees in it, which probably makes me a bit of a weird foodie. I love eating. I can't help it. It's just, I mean, come on. Every single one of us, that's the one thing we have in common. We all eat. And no matter where you go in the world, everybody has to eat. So I will never be out of a job. And that's the cool thing. You guys will never be out of a job too. Now, when was this? This is October of last year. Every time I come to Melbourne, I get hay fever, so apologies, that's why I sound like this. But I saw this in the Bourke Street Mall, and I don't normally engage with activists of any description. I just, you got to pick your battles and choose what suits your piece, and sometimes that doesn't suit your piece at all. But I saw this picture, and these guys had their table, and they were doing their thing, and they had their videos, and they were really, getting the crowd hyped up, and they had about 150 people standing there watching their images. And let's be honest, it can be quite graphic, and it is quite emotional to see that. But this picture was about 10 meters away from them. So I went, took a photo of it, because I thought, I've never seen that. It's unusual, and I can 100% prove them wrong. That's what I was thinking in my head. And then this guy comes up, and he starts talking to me, and I'm like, you know what, I really don't want to do this. But he just keeps going. He's like, are you vegan? I'm like, no. Do you eat meat? Yes. How could you do that? That is so cruel. I'm like, look, dude, I really don't want to do this. Like, please, don't push me. And he just kept going, and he's like, what, you think you can't do this? I'm like, all right. You're on. And my friend she's a associate prof at Melbourne Uni, she was there, and she's like, Anneline, don't do this. I'm like, no, Michelle, I can do this. This is the one thing that I can actually do. If you want to talk about food and nutrition, I can do this. Talk about anything else, maybe not. But this is mine. So you want me to prove you wrong? No problem. Give me the microphone. But my rules are, you cannot interrupt me when you ask questions. Let me answer the question. No swearing, no name calling. And you got to let me answer it completely. And they were like, yeah, sure, go for it. So I did. And so the guy was like, well, meat's really cruel. The meat industry is really cool. The animals are stressed out when they go to slaughter. And I'm like, that is not true. Because what color is the meat that you buy? I asked the audience, and they were like, it's bright red. I'm like, well, that's an indicator that it wasn't stressed out. If it's cherry red, it means it's oxygenated. When an animal is stressed before slaughter, if it's beef or lamb, it has a thing called dry cutting. So it's like a dark maroony purple color. That is how you know that animal was stressed out before it was slaughtered. If it's pork, you can poke it and it'll squirt water at you, and it's a really pale color. And it's got a condition called PSC. That means that animal was stressed out before slaughter. So meat doesn't lie. Even if the abattoirs were, cruel human beings and all they were interested was in profit margins, it is in their best interest to treat the animal humanely in order to have good eating quality. Because if it's crap eating quality, no one's going to buy it. They're like, oh yeah, okay, all right, okay, interesting. Like, meat causes cancer. I'm like, no, it doesn't. We do not have any mechanisms to prove that eating meat causes cancer. What we do know, we do know that there are certain diets, there are lifestyles that increase your risk of developing certain cancers. That's true. But to say that meat causes cancer, we can't do that. We can say cigarettes causes cancer because we know exactly what the compound is in that cigarette that will lead to this carcinogen in the body that will cause this outcome. But we can't do that for meat. Right. All right, okay, fair enough. Well, plants are going to save the world. Everyone should eat plants. I can get protein from plants. And I was like, mate, if protein was going to save the world from plants, then the third world would not be the third world. They are literally in that position because they don't have nutritionally dense food. That is the problem that they've got. And so at the end of it, these guys packed up their table, and I just stood at the microphone and I just answered questions from the audience in the Bourke Street Mall. We did that for about half an hour. They asked me any nutrition-related question, and I just was like, yeah, let's do it. And then they took their stuff, they gave me a round of applause, and they went off, and I went off and had my lunch. And my friend who was there, she just watched the whole thing, and I'm like, why the hell didn't you video it? Like, seriously, social media, come on. Typical professor, like, honestly. And she was like, Anneline, I can't believe you literally just knocked that out of the ballpark. And I was like, the thing is, Michelle, And she's a fertility medicine researcher, so you can't question her on any of that stuff. She knows her stuff really well. I'm like, when you know your expertise and you know your stuff, I know that's very colloquial English, but when you know it, and you got the evidence to back you up, no one can challenge that. And so what I want to encourage you guys to do, I've seen like some of those things we saw today, like the pictures of the koalas, that's so cute. The amount of, hectares of land that's been decreased, it's so low, and 64% of, we're heading towards these great numbers. I can't remember what that fact was about, but I took a photo of it. This is amazing. And you guys are the experts in this. I'm just the expert in nutrition and taste buds, but you're the expert in everything that leads to my taste buds. So you got to own that. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a bit about nutrition, because ultimately, whether you like it or not, you're also nutritionists, because you make food products that we get to eat. So what we're going to be talking about is beef. It is naturally nutritious. It is not a processed food product. It is amazing, and it's important for sustainable health. Now, I actually went and did some Googling, and I thought about it. Sustainable beef, what comes up? What do people actually see if they Google that? And so the only things that I started finding when I looked at it was, firstly, this was good, is your report, number one. That's pretty smart. It was right up there. Hopefully the general public read it. But, it's all about emphasizing alternative health practices to keep animals healthy. It's fixated on the environment, fixated on greenhouse gas emissions. A lot of this is led by industry organizations, which is great. That's not a bad thing. If you look at this on Instagram, it's totally different. But this is Google. So we're seeing, the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. Cargill have got reports out there. If you go look at news, I always like looking at the news. What's the latest and the greatest? So 19 minutes after I did my search at 2:30 this morning, the Dakota Valley Growers, they have received a grant for sustainable beef production. And again, it's very much so fixated on these carbon neutrality, greenhouse gas emissions, fixated on the environment. What's really great is that Grilled has now launched the world's first sustainable burger. I think they were the second in the world to do the world's first plant-based burger. So, they're really hedging their bets, those guys. If you look at images is all about happy cows and green pastures. Talking about, again, methane emissions, carbon neutrality. So it is very much so fixated in the mind of society. And whether that's because that's what they think, or is that because of the information that we're putting out there and the algorithms that are doing this, it is very much so fixated around the environment. And there's nothing wrong with that. We need the environment. We've got to look after the environment. It's super important to do proper stewardship of the environment. But it's more than just methane, okay? The sustainable story is way more than just methane. How has this beautiful piece of meat become so fixated with methane? We got to look at history. So hunter-gatherers by and large are over, except you got some places, the Masai Mara, that still do that. Some very remote indigenous communities as well. We have the ancient Egyptians to thank us for modern agricultural practices, because they started doing mass production on the banks of the Nile. And that's led to, this is from Bob's Sapphire Feedlot, where they've got 1 kilometre long irrigators. So we've moved a long way in terms of our agriculture from that angle. However, the food industry, by and large, is a very slow evolving thing. So 1500s, we had the explorers travel around the world finding spices. The 1800s, we had the Industrial Revolution. And whilst they were doing all the machines, Louis Pasteur was discovering microbes in one corner, which led to the discovery of pasteurization, heat treating, retorting, things that could destroy bacteria to make food safe for a longer period of time. All right? So food safety has been where it's at until about the 1950s, 1960s, when automation in the car industry moved into the food industry, so more products out the door. But now we're dealing with trade agreements, we're dealing with greenhouse gas emissions, we've got artificial intelligence telling us how people buy food in the shops. Totally different world. Totally different world. Planet Earth is not what it used to be 2,000 years ago, even 200 years ago. It's still largely the same, but it has evolved. The light bulb from the 1950s is not the light bulb in 2000. It's not the light bulb for today. It won't be the light bulb tomorrow. The only thing that hasn't changed is humans. I mean, we haven't evolved with wings or, I don't know, unicorn horn or something, but how we think has definitely changed. How we get our information has definitely changed. But the one thing that has not changed is nutrition. Whether you're a caveman or in today's world, you need to eat food to get nutrition. It is our sole form of fuel for our body. So where does it leave the ag sector and the farmers? Well, you're kind of like Shell, really, the petroleum companies. You guys are creating this really cool food source that actually helps us to survive. This is me eating Wagyu for the very first time. Damn, that is good. It was very good. I'd never eaten Wagyu before because nutritionally, we've got to have lean cuts of meat, remove all your white fat, and I could not get my head around how on earth do I extract muscle fibers out of white meat until I actually tasted the Wagyu, and it was amazing. It was a great eating experience. How has meat become so associated with so many different negativities in life? The whole planet's burning up because of a cow. Colon cancer, it's the cow's fault. If my car doesn't start, it's probably got something to do with the cow farmer. How has it happened when it is such a nutritionally dense, enjoyable food source, right? Now, I want to move us. Now, you've probably seen this picture. I actually know Jan, the guy who came up with this, and he's a great guy. And it's so important. We have to try and shift the narrative to being so fixated on carbon emissions. Sustainability covers all these other topics. If we're fixated only in one and we're lopsided in 90 other parts of this whole circle, well, then we've lost it. We may win the carbon problem, but if everybody has malnutrition, they don't really care about carbon if they can't actually function. All right, so this is an interesting report, I guess you could say. It's on LinkedIn. Dan is one of the biggest agriculture influencers in the USA. He's got a really important podcast out there. And he did this thing, he's put it up on LinkedIn, which shows what do people actually think of farmers. And so they're really fixated on what farmers do. But actually the farmer on the ground, on the farm, never really thought about them. Never really think about the practicalities that they have to deal with every single day. And that's really quite insightful, because if we don't really think about, if the general public doesn't actually know the face of a farmer, they don't feel the problems that farmers have to go through, the constraints that they've got to work within, the cold, the dry, the wet. The fact that you guys are on 365 days of the year and you don't really get much breaks, you've got to always have someone there looking after your cows. They don't see that. They don't feel that, so they can't really resonate with that. Because the rest of us do 9-to-5 jobs Monday to Friday and probably on Facebook for 25% of it. You know what I mean? So we've got to really try and change that narrative because we're really important. Now, if we look at the world, moving from 2015 all the way to 2100, we're growing. Our population is 100% increasing. We're heading towards about 10.8 billion people, and then we'll plateau because our birth rate and our death rate will be roughly about the same. Can we cope with that? Yes, planet Earth can cope with that. But we've just got to be a bit more strategic in how we do that. Now, here's the thing. 2100 is not that far away. It's only 77 years away? It's not that far away, if you think about it. I will probably be about 120 years old. And I could potentially be alive if I live in Japan. Most of us probably won't be alive. But if you've got kids or nephews, nieces, they will most definitely be alive. Hopefully, touch wood, that nothing goes wrong. But they've got a good chance that they will be alive. So when you start thinking about it in that perspective, what is the world going to look like in 2100? How am I going to live? How am I going to buy my food? What am I physically going to be doing? Or my kids? or my family, or whoever it is, what food am I actually going to be eating? Is it just going to be the Jetsons, or am I going to be eating real food? Now, you start thinking about yourself in a very different perspective, because what we do now is going to create that, yeah? So when we look at population density, apart from the fact that we're growing, where are we growing? So from the early 1900s, if you look at where the populations are growing, especially the dark orangey red colors, that tells us the countries that are having this population boom. And the first thing you notice is that Alaska and Australia do not change. One is very cold, one is very hot. Not that no one likes us, they really do. It's just that we're a giant-sized island with nothing going on between the coastlines. Even New Zealand has more people per kilometre, so it says a lot for them. They're just more dense, I guess. But it gives you an indication of where these populations are. Africa, Asia is where the growth is happening and will continue to happen in a lot of ways. So where does it leave Australia? If you got a stack load of people growing in those countries, where does that leave us? What can we do? What role do we play in feeding a global market? Now, this graph always gets a lot of people whenever I show it to them, and that's why I do it. Because this shows you the purchasing power parity percentage for the world GDP. Now, for a very long time, up until 2008, the power of contributing to the world's GDP was in the developed world. 2008 was pivotal. Something changed. It was a 50-50 thing. And from 2008 onwards, it has been more contribution, purchasing power in emerging markets than in the developed world. Now, that's not to say that those countries are mega rich. There's a lot more people, so you got wealth spread out over many people, which means individually per person, there's a lot less per person, but there's a lot of them. So, and they want to buy good food because they're crammed in a smaller space. If you look at poverty trends over time, so this is $1.90 USD, living below $1.90 USD, and you can see it's pretty low. But we're moving up to $3.20 USD per day, and we can see across every single region of the world we're increasing. And if we move up to $5.50 USD globally, every single emerging market in the world is moving up. And what we do know, the research is very solid on this. When people in emerging markets have a little bit more cash, the first thing they do not spend it on is the Rolex. What they spend it on is food. Okay? Because that's what they can afford. And they also know that food is essential for survival. So they're going for that better quality food, whatever that better quality food means to them. Now, for a lot of these markets, they don't have the luxury of choice. They have to eat beans and lentils because that's all they got there. So when they have a bit more cash, if they can, they will definitely go towards animal protein. So here we can see it. These are global protein demands. So I want you to first, we're going to start, I'm going to press go, and I want you to see where Australia is in 1960 and where Australia ends in 2017. So Australia starts off at about 71 grams in 1960. And by the time Australia gets to the end, you'll see Australia doesn't change a whole lot. Australia stays exactly the same in terms of its animal protein intake per person, 71 grams. So when someone tells you that we're eating way more meat than we ever did, that's not exactly true. In terms of animal protein, we haven't changed in 50 years. We're consistent. Got to love us for that. Israel is a really interesting player in the market. It literally came out in about the 1970s and it's got to the top. But it also eats a lot of plant protein. But the thing that's really interesting to look at is China, Brazil, India, Nigeria. These are massive populations, huge markets. And even though India started off at about 5 grams in 1960 of animal protein, you got 1.3 billion people. And that's moved up to 15 grams. That's a 3-fold increase across 1.3 billion people. Which means that, yes, even in a country where their religion plays a very big role in the diet that they're eating, they actually are still moving towards incorporating more animal protein in their diets. So what does that mean for Team Australia? All right, when it comes to Australia and our consumers, when it comes to plant exclusivity, I know it seems like plant exclusivity is a big thing and there's a lot of people who are doing that. In actual fact, it's only 2% of the population are plant exclusive. So I'm talking about vegan or vegetarian that does not even include dairy products in their diet, right? Only 2% of the population. We do know that 30% of the Australian population will have a nut milk once per week in a smoothie. Okay, and that's only once per week. So in their coffee, in their tea, in their cafe latte, in their breakfast cereal, they're actually still going for dairy milk. This study was done in the USA by an animal activist group, and it's a really great study. Like, in terms of the research quality of it, it is actually very good. And it's very surprising, and it's interesting that they even published it, because it doesn't really work towards their purposes. What they did is they tracked people who became vegan for 5 years to see where they landed after 5 years. And what they found is those who chose to become vegan for health reasons, after 5 years, they went back, 84% of them went back to being an omnivore. It is very hard to maintain health on a plant-exclusive diet. You got to have a very good bank account to pay for supplements. It's hard to do if you're going to do it properly. So if your health is your motivation, most people will end up going back to an omnivore diet. Now, in Canada, the Canadian government actually did this study, which is also very interesting. And what they found is that consumers who went plant-exclusive, vegan or vegetarian, they said that they would go back to an omnivore diet. 60% of them would go back to an omnivore diet if they knew the animals were humanely treated. So that just says there's a breakdown in understanding, breakdown in their level of understanding of health and nutrition, and a breakdown in their understanding of animal husbandry, which we saw it earlier, how great this is real rich data that you guys have got. It just needs to be put out there a bit more, articulated a bit more strongly. When we look at the motivators for why people buy plant-exclusive products, like we're talking about our chickpea burgers and our cell-cultured burgers and things like that. This was done here in Australia. And what we see, you'd think it would be animal ethics or the environment, but 70% of them in the supermarkets surveyed actually chose these products for health reasons. Marketing is really powerful. Okay? Plants can do no wrong. Come on. They're dietary fiber. They feed your guts and they help you poop out. There's nothing that they can do wrong, right? So what is it about meat that is so amazing? Apart from it being a great source of protein, what else is this about it? Nutrition is really important. Here's the thing, though. We eat food, not individual nutrients. Okay? And I really want you guys to get that. If that's the only thing you take away from today, hold on to that. We eat food, not individual nutrients. We sat down, we just had lunch. You had steak, you had potatoes, you had some beans, there's a bread roll there. That grilled onion actually is the healthiest way to eat onions. It actually helps you absorb the most phenolic acids from the onions, which actually decreases your LDL cholesterol production from the steak. So that meal, whoever did it, chef, you nailed it. Amazing, right? We eat food, not individual nutrients. But food is our sole source of nutrients. Unless you're an infant on baby formula and you can't have breast milk for whatever reason, or you're really sick and you need supplementation, fine. But for the vast majority of us, that's our thing. So when it comes to nutrition, what I'm talking about very simply is we're talking about our macronutrients, which is carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. So they're needed in greater than 1 gram in the body. Scientists are amazing. Macro, bigger than 1. Micro means we need in less than 1 gram. Micro, teeny tiny. So we're talking about our vitamins and our minerals. The thing with them, though, even though we need so little, it's very easy to have micronutrient deficiencies. It's a huge problem. And then we have things called non-nutrients, like dietary fiber, water, phytonutrients. So they are very important, but if you don't have them, you won't end up with a deficiency disease. That's how they go, right? So that's what we're talking about. and non-nutrients. Now, when we look at how nutrition has evolved over time, and I get this all the time, I can't eat eggs, I can't eat butter, now I can eat eggs, now I can eat butter. Fat's good, now fat's not good, now butter's good. Like, what the hell is going on here? Sugar's not good anymore, now hold on, can I eat fruit? Nutrition as a science is only about 200 years old, right? And if you look at Time magazine, it literally shows you how we've evolved and we keep evolving and we keep evolving in our messaging. But here's why nutrition can sometimes seem to have these misnomers. And it's because it's based on what we know right now. So we started off in the early 1900s, and we discovered vitamins, we discovered minerals. And so that's how we came up with nutrient deficiencies. We came out with recommended dietary intakes way back then. With time, over time, we started to see a change in health, especially after the wars. Baby boomers were booming, money was sweet, everyone's working, KFC started, and KFC started for a very good motivation. If they started now, they would never have taken off the ground. But when the Colonel started KFC, he did it because women were entering the workforce and they didn't have time to make chicken at home. So he was like, I will help them. And that's what he did. And the only thing is, we started seeing a giant-sized spike in chronic health conditions at the same time. So now we're having heaps and heaps of diabetes and heart disease and things like that, and doctors are trying to work out, what is it? Oh my gosh, it must be fat and sugar and those sort of compounds, right? In the 2000s, we started looking at dietary patterns. So why is it that men in Italy don't have much prostate cancer? Oh, they eat lots of tomatoes. Fascinating. Dietary pattern. That's epidemiology. And that's kind of the biggest, it's a great thing. It shows us relationships. It doesn't show us mechanisms of action. And that's kind of where the food industry has this problem, because we've got a lot of epidemiological studies out there, and they're great. We need it. But if we don't look further into the mechanism, we come up with these statements that meat causes cancer. Well, meat doesn't cause cancer. You need to understand what's in that food. That is there something in that? Well, in case of lycopene in tomatoes, there is. Lycopene in tomatoes actually does help to prevent prostate cancer. We've got the very good research on that. We've done a lot of work in that space. We need to do that for meat as well, though. 2010 into 2020, we're looking at population health. Gut health became the bee's knees. It was our newest organ. It only got organ status. The gut microbiome became an organ in 2013, so it's our newest member. And so obviously that's opened a whole new world of research into genotypes and different types of technologies to improve nutritional composition in food. Where are we heading though now? Well, we're still doing all that stuff, but we're also looking at mechanisms of action. Let's take the epidemiology and let's actually see what happens what's in meat. If I cook it till it's raw, that's not cooking. If I cook it till it's well done versus if it's rare, which one has more bioavailability of iron? Is there a change? Does that actually produce more carcinogens if I cook it for a longer period of time? What impact does that have on the human body? So that's what we're starting to look at. Now, when we look at Australia's health versus the rest of the world, okay? We're doing good-ish. Yes, we're living for a long time. And you can see the prevalence of overweight and obesity amongst the world. And it is largely in developed countries, okay? Now, the emerging markets, they are emerging in this way as well, but it's largely in the developed nations. Now, here's the deal. That's the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating. We have not had the triangle or the pyramid since 1980, and yet most people talk about the triangle and the pyramid. We haven't actually had it in Australia. It's an American thing, not an Australian thing. We have the plate, and it's a great plate. And what you can see, the numbers on the sides, is what is the recommended dietary intake per person, adults, on average, per day, okay? 5 serves of veggies, 3 serves of protein-rich foods, 2 serves of fruits and veggies. This is how we're tracking. You think fruit would be easy, don't you? To have 2 pieces of fruit a day, and yet we're doing 1.4 a day on average. We're not hitting our fruit target, let alone vegetables. And we do know veggies are great for our digestive tract. Dietary fiber does clean you out. Antioxidants do have a very important role. So if we're not having... We're only having 2.5 serves of vegetables, and potato doesn't count, guys, just putting it out there. Chips, mash, it's not part of that. If we're not actually eating enough dietary fiber that's rich in antioxidants, fruits and vegetables, which we know is very strongly associated with developing colon cancer, why is meat getting blamed? Can you see what I'm saying there? Yeah? Meat often gets blamed. It's an easy target, which is really unfortunate. The problem is not with your sector. The problem is public health is not really doing a great marketing scheme. Who are the government people here? I was sitting at your table. Whoops. But definitely tell them this. They need to do this a lot better. All right? Protein includes red meat, includes dairy, it includes fish. We're actually not hitting our target. We're meant to have 3 serves per day. We're not even doing that. Now here, if we have a look at what our diet does look like, we've got people from Chad on one side, lowest socioeconomic group, poorest country in the world, versus lowest socioeconomic group in Australia. I've done a comparison between that. And you can see what they have. It's pretty much lentils, beans, and when they can afford it, soup with fresh sheep meat is their favourite meal. Whereas if you compare it here in Australia, and you look at what is in their background, there is stack loads of soft drinks, stack loads of... I'm not against processing. Let's get something clear. Processing is a technology. It's the formulations that need to be worked on, okay? Formulations that are nutritionally inferior are very cheap to produce. And there is stack loads of that in that product, in that picture. We've got a little bit of sausage up the front, a little bit of what is that, mince. There's a tray of chops, but by and large, well, there's not much fruits and vegetables. There is a whole lot of processed everything else. So is the problem the meat in the diet? Given that we're still having 71 grams of animal protein a day, meat and 3 veg is actually a nutritionally superior meal to have. It's very, very, very good for you. It's just that we're not doing that. Yeah? So, and this is my cooking. I've got meat and 4 veg, or 5 if you include the onions. Now, I was having this chat with Jacob. We're having a look at what's in that book, and meat is a great source of protein, it's a good source of iron, it's all this, and that. Unless you were Jordan Peterson, now, he wrote this book, 12 Rules for Life. I really do like it. It's got a great thing in it, lots of great rules. The only thing is, world's best psychologist has literally come out with his own diet called the Lion Diet, where he only eats meat. I mean, dude, stick to your lane. You're a psychologist, okay? Deal with my head, not with my digestive tract. His diet is only eat what lions eat. I mean, he does cook it, so he's not quite sticking to the lion diet, but he only eats what lions eat, which is 100% a meat-exclusive diet. And the thing is, when you're doing something like that, whether it be keto or carnivore, whatever it is, and you don't have your fruits and veggies on that side, we're not having our dietary fiber, we're not having, the corn has got lutein in it, which is great for my eyesight. We've got some sweet potato, which is carotene, which is converted to vitamin A. My green beans and my zucchini are a great source of phenolic acids. And my onions have also got a different type of phenolic acids that decreases the LDL production in my body. So what I'm telling you in a nutshell is that we eat a combination of foods. And nutrition is all about the combination of foods that we eat to get the combination of health outcomes. If we're fixated on one thing, we will lose out on all the others. Now, this is where I had this brainwave at about 2:30 in the morning, and I thought about this. Well, in my sleep, I got up, and I thought one of the biggest issues when it comes to the sustainability story is we measure greenhouse gas emissions per kilo of whatever, yeah? Per kilo of steak, per kilo of beef, per kilo of fish, per kilo of sawdust. We don't usually do sawdust, but we should. And when you do it like this, yes, beef looks like it's got a giant-sized greenhouse gas emission problem, okay? It's light years ahead of everybody. Well, it shouldn't be. This is not what we're aiming for. But here's the thing, okay? No one eats a kilo of anything. We eat nutrients. So we've got to look at this in terms of the nutritional comparison. Now, when I change this greenhouse gas emissions per calories, 1,000 kilocalories, because food is a source of energy, right? Now, prawns is actually not too far off. Farmed prawns is not too far off from beef. It's actually, this giant size gap is really not there because now we're looking at a different measurement. Still greenhouse gas emissions, but for energy. And then if we do it for protein, you're looking at this, okay, beef is up there, and then we've got lamb and mutton, but who's in number 3? Tomatoes. Tomatoes. Tomatoes have got the same greenhouse gas emissions as lamb and mutton. If we're looking at 100 grams per 100 grams of protein. So what's the point here? Okay, the point is when we're measuring things like greenhouse gas emissions, whatever that may be, we've got to look at it in terms of comparing apples with apples. Okay, so if I had to do this, the same thing, I don't have the data here. You can 100% quote me on this. If we were doing this in terms of greenhouse gas emissions per 100 grams of vitamin B12, okay, no one else would be even on the scale. Okay, beef might be on that scale, but beef is literally our main source of B12 in our diet. And without B12, why is B12 even important? Without B12, you cannot absorb energy from carbohydrates. Your cells can't get the energy out of that potato you ate. You need B12. So your steak actually helped you get the energy out of your bread roll and your potatoes. If you didn't have that, you'd be in trouble. Okay? B12. So if we're doing that for iron, bioavailable iron, how does meat compare now? Well, it's a totally new conversation. Yeah? So I'm going to show you just briefly 4 factors that affect nutrition quality. And I really want you guys to get this. Nutrition quality is what it's all about. It's not enough to tell me that that moose has got 50 grams of sugar and 2 grams of fat, and it's low fat. How much can I actually absorb? What is it doing inside my body, right? So you could take any nutrient and stick it in here. We're not just talking about protein. You do B12, you could do iron, you could do zinc, you could do whatever. Number 1, we need to talk about quantity. We need to talk about the type of nutrient. We have to look at digestibility and absorption and the structure that it comes in, the network. So mince versus steak. Beef broth versus meatballs or something like that, high-pressure processed meat. So when I'm talking about quantity, firstly, I'm talking about individuals. What do you actually need? So protein requirements for guys and girls differ because we've got different body structures and different proportions of lean muscle tissue to fat tissue. And if you're an elite athlete, you're really getting to eat a lot of food up there. But basically, it is X grams of protein per kilogram of your own body weight. So you can do the maths, work that out for yourself. It's pretty straightforward. Okay? So that's what you got to think about is individually. So you can use this for yourself. Take a photo. You can do your own nutrition profiling at home. You don't need a dietitian. Second thing is how much of that is actually in the food we eat. All right, so now I know how much I need, but how much is actually in the food that I eat? So here's the thing. When I'm standardizing, right, I'm using energy as my benchmark. How much of protein in a 200 kilocalorie serve of whatever? So when it comes to steak, in a 200 kilocalorie serve of steak, that's about 21 grams of protein. And that's roughly about 83 grams of steak. Okay? When I look at tofu, yep, I'm having about 24 grams of protein. That's true. It's a pretty decent amount. I got to eat 241 grams of tofu to get that, though. If I ate 83 grams of tofu, then what am I having? Only 8 grams of protein. Yeah? So we're not talking about the same thing. Just because an alternative protein, soy milk, tofu patties, whatever it is, crickets, have got protein in it, it doesn't mean to say it's the same as the amount of protein or the type of protein that is in beef. Yeah? Really important to get that. The second thing is, what is that protein made up of? Okay, so proteins are made up of amino acids. The ones that are highlighted in yellow, so you've got like histidine, it has IA at the end of it. IA means indispensable amino acid. The yellow ones are the ones that our body cannot actually manufacture. We have to eat it. There is no way else that we can get it in our diet. And without the complete set of amino acids, those 20 at the top, 21 and 22, they're used in different functions in the body. But numbers 1 to 20 are very important. They are what builds your DNA. DNA that makes your strands of your hair, your skin, your colon cells that line the neural sheaths around your brain nerves, your toenails, your babies that help you do the whole thing. Your babies. DNA is super important, but we need all 20 of those amino acids to do it. And the yellow ones are what we get from our food. Okay, so when it comes to protein quality, how much of these amino acids, especially the indispensable ones, the essential ones, what we need, is actually in the food, and how much of it can I actually absorb? All right, so this is an interesting table, and this was published just 2021. That I compared it with another one just to make sure. So yeah, having a look at your essential amino acids. You've got beef, we've got lamb, we've got pork, and you can see it. Beef is, they're very comparable. That's true, they are. But it shows you it's a great source of the amino acids we need. Beans are not that. You can do it though. Baked beans do have some amino acids missing, and bread has some amino acids missing. So if you have baked beans on toast for breakfast, you actually are able to create a complete amino acid profile. But how many people know that? Unless you have Anneline living with you at home, not many people actually know that. Okay? So we can potentially be causing more health problems because we're putting food products out in the market that don't contain all the nutrients we actually need. Yeah? Whereas when it comes to things like beef, it contains it all there. Now that we've got that, and then you've got my palm size. Is that what's up? Yeah? I'll explain that at the end. So now we know that beef has got all of the essential amino acids that we need. Okay. How much can we actually absorb? Now, this is a really important thing. The DS score, DIAAS, the DS score, it's been around for quite a while, and it's it's well used in industry, especially in infant formula industry, because we need to make sure nutrition is paramount for those little bubs. Basically, it measures how much of these amino acids are digestible. And milk whey extract is the benchmark. It is the control. Now, anything over a score of 100 is considered to be a really good quality protein because it has the highest rate of digestible amino acids. So that means the steak that I ate, I've chewed it up in my mouth, it's landed in my stomach, pH 1.8, acid is breaking it down, it ends up in my small intestine. There's 6 meters of small intestine. Put that into context. A male adult giraffe is 6 meters. So it's got to get through 6 meters of small intestine to get to my colon. How much of it is getting absorbed during that process, right? So that's what the DS score measures. If it's not absorbed, you will just poop it out. Okay? 2 things. So we want to absorb. That's important. So when we look at beef, milk is 114, eggs is 113, milk is 111, beef is 111. It has a really high DS score. It is considered a very high quality protein food because it is easy. It is easy for us to digest, and it's also very absorbable as well. Now let's compare that to, say, tofu. Remember? Tofu was there. I got to eat 241 grams to get a similar amount of protein as an 83-gram steak, and yet its DS score is only 52. Anything less than 75 is considered poor quality protein. So whilst tofu has got protein in it, yeah, definitely does. Not discounting that. But we're not talking about the same thing here. We are literally comparing chalk and cheese. Yeah? And that's really important. That's a strong message. That's a strong statement that you guys get to own. So the WHO were well ahead of themselves when they came up with this statement way back in 1991 that the quality of a protein, but this could be anything really. I could put iron, I could put B12, I could put zinc, and thus the food source, remember, because we eat food, not nutrients, is vital when considering the nutritional benefits that it can provide, the quality of that protein. It's not just about protein content, it's about the quality of that protein. By determining the quality of a protein, that is determined by assessing the essential amino acid content, the digestibility, and the bioavailability of these amino acids. Now, I like using this story, and I use it for a whole lot of different things, partially because I think these guys who created it should get a Nobel Prize Award, but it really encapsulates the power of good quality nutrition and the power of good quality food that we all should be able to access. Now, this little kid on the screen, he is malnourished, that is true. Most people think he's not eating enough food. That's not true. He actually is eating the right amount of energy, the calories. He's eating the right amount for that child's age group. He has a condition called kwashiorkor. Kwashiorkor happens in kids between the ages of 18 months to about 5 years. Marasmus happens in newborns till about 18 months. And basically, it is a protein energy malnutrition disease. You need protein to absorb energy from the foods we eat. Okay? It's just simply put. If we don't have enough protein, and we don't also have B12, we cannot actually absorb the energy from the foods we eat. Now, these kids in these places, in Africa, Haiti, places like that, they eat a lot of maize, they eat a lot of starch, they eat a lot of tubers, which are great starchy foods, great source of energy, but there's literally no protein in that. So they end up with this condition. And their head's all swollen, it's got edema. You can see the belly's all swollen with gas. Their arms are super skinny. But if you look at his feet and his ankles, it's swollen with water. And they will die. There is no way out for them. You cannot give them food because they can't absorb anything from it. Plus, it changes their taste buds. And the only way they can actually make them survive is to literally put them on an IV drip. It's the only way out. So this doctor in the middle, Professor Andre, he was a pediatrician with WHO, he still is, he would go out to these places in the 1990s and he would see these kids, and it's sad because they will die purely because they can't get enough good quality protein in their diet. And so he came back to his friend. I mean, unless they get IV drips in all the refugee camps, there's nothing you can do. So he told his friend, Michael, who is a food scientist. And he was like, is this so sad? I don't know what to do. Like, what do we, it's heartbreaking to see hundreds of children being killed purely because they don't have protein. And he actually was one of the guys who invented Nutella. So he was like, oh, I can do this. I can fix this problem up. And based off his experience in Nutella, he created Plumpy Nut. So Plumpy Nut is essentially peanuts, great source of fat and plant protein, a lot of sugar because it affects their taste buds, so they got to make something that's really sweet and palatable. Skim milk powder, which is a source of all essential amino acids, and then they put a whole bunch of vitamins and minerals in it. And they give it to these kids, Plumpy Nut, no IV drip. Here we've got a little girl, this was in 2021 in Haiti, and she was, how old? She's a year old, she weighed 4.5 kilos. You can actually see her intestines, that's how malnourished she was. 12 weeks later, 3 times a day on Plumpy Nut, she plumped up. And once they get to this state, you can actually give them proper food, and they can continue to live, and they're fine. But that is what the power of nutrition is all about. So Plumpy Nut is a great product for them. They have to make it for that environment. It's easy, it's cheap for those communities to produce. It's not something that they're meant to live on. So once they get them off, then they've got to actually eat normal food, and hopefully that's nutritionally dense food. So what does this mean for you guys? All right, we don't have issues too much with Plumpy Nut type problems in this country, but we got a big role to play, and we can play it. All right? First thing I want you to remember is we eat food, not nutrients. But food is our fuel source. And that depends on whether you're putting E10 in your car or 98. Which one are you choosing? Good quality fuel or cheaper quality fuel? Okay? And so you guys actually create a really good quality fuel. The Different foods have different nutritional densities. Protein is not protein, is not protein, is not protein. We've got to look at that amino acid content, and we've got to look at its absorbability, right? And then that leads me to the last point. Beef is naturally nutritionally dense. Naturally nutritionally dense. It is a complete protein. So unless you've got me living with you and I can help you make your beans, fill out the amino acid profile by mixing things together, you don't know that. So we need to give the general public, consumers, complete foods, complete nutrition. That is a rich source of so many other micronutrients as well. You don't need much to have the health benefits. So you saw that picture of me with my hand on the plate. Now, everybody's got a set of hands, all right? If you got 2 hands, girls, you got 1 hand. Oh, you've got 2 hands, but you're going to use 1 hand for this. Your thumb is roughly the serve of fat that you need per day. You can take this with you wherever you go, right? So that's your thumb. That's your oil, that's your salad dressing, that's your butter, that's your peanut butter, that's your avocado on your toast, right? For guys, you need 2 thumbs. Girls, you need 1 thumb. Your fist, scrunch up your fist, that is your serve of carbohydrate. Okay, so your bread roll, your potato, your pasta, your noodles, your rice. 2 of those for guys, 1 of these for girls. If you cup your hands, that's your serve of vegetables. 2 of those for guys, 1 of these for girls. That's your serve. And you look at the palm of your hand, that is your serve of protein, whether that be steak, fish, tofu, whatever you want it to be. Crickets, just make sure it's the size of your palm. You carry that with you. It's personalized to you. It's your hand. You wouldn't use my hand for some of you, right? Because mine is smaller than a lot of guys here. So you carry that with you. And that's food. That is the power of food and nutrition. And you guys, I think you really need to own it. And own that. Step into that. What you do is on the same playing field as medical doctors, if not even more important. My sister's a cardiovascular scientist, and she says it to me. She's like, Annie, I make money out of people being sick. Did you just hear what you said? She's like, there's literally no money in what you do. You try to make people not get sick. Whereas for me, I will always have a job. I need people to be sick to earn my income. That is true. It's 100% true. We need these cardiovascular doctors. We need the cardiologists. We do. I'm not saying don't do that. We need them. But what she's saying is true. Prevention is better than cure. And I think what you create, what you make, what you raise, your cattle, the environment is important. But without the nutritional beef that you actually produce, the environment doesn't mean anything if we're all dead and we're all sick. So own that. Thank you so much for having me.